Good morning, good afternoon, wherever you're at. My name is Mike Coleman. I'm a developer advocate on the Lightsail today, and I'm here today to give you a little bit of information on how you can manage and deploy WordPress on Amazon Lightsail. I'm joined today with Gabriel, my colleague. Gabriel, you want to introduce yourself?
Hi, this is Gabriel Gosselin. I'm a senior web development engineer for the Lightsail team, and I build the front end.
Yeah, so he does all the hard work, and I just talk about it. Anyway, all right, so what we're going to cover today in the webinar is, why WordPress? Why is WordPress an important workload for us at Amazon, and why do we want to make it a first-class citizen on Lightsail? We're going to then go through and just real briefly talk about what Lightsail is. If you're not familiar with the actual platform, Gabriel will do a demo for us. We'll talk about WordPress and Lightsail, how they actually go together. Gabriel will then deploy WordPress out onto Lightsail. And then we'll talk a little bit about, well, what do you do after your instance is up and running, right? Well, maybe you want to migrate it, maybe you want to scale it, and then we're going to leave you with a slide of some resources that you might want to take advantage of after this webinar. So we're going to go and we're going to talk for about a half hour, a little more, a little less, and then we're going to have time for Q&A. So we'll get your questions after the presentation, but feel free to send them in. All right, so why WordPress? I mean, obviously, it's huge, right? So it is the #1 content management system out there, running about 25% of all the world's websites, which is a huge chunk. I think part of that is because it's so easy to use. The other part of it's easy to grow it, right? And Lightsail wants to be part of that and help you along those lines, but get you started in a super simple way, but give you a path forward as your blog or your website grows and needs additional scale, additional capabilities. It's incredibly customizable. A bunch of themes, a bunch of plugins, and the important thing about when you think about Lightsail and WordPress is we don't restrict any of that. We're just giving you an easier way to get Lightsail up and running, WordPress up and running on Lightsail. Lots of developers and designers, and then because it's open source, low cost. Marries very well with the low cost of Lightsail, which we'll talk about here in a little bit. So let's go ahead. What is Lightsail? So Amazon Lightsail, what we like to say is it's the easiest way to get started on AWS. So I came from a background where I did a lot of work on the EC2 console, deploying instances, right, in AWS. And so if you've done that before, there's a bunch of clicks in there, you make a bunch of decisions, a bunch of stuff to fill in. We want to take that and boil it down to the essence of what you need to know to start up a server in Amazon Web Services. And that is, where do I want to run it? What do I want to run? How much do I want to pay, and what do I want to name it? Like, what do I want to name an instance? And you'll see that in the demo. So what Lightsail provides is a quick way to spin up virtual private servers and do that at a predictable price every month. We offer predictable price, we offer ease of use, we couple that with important features that people want. So for instance, static IP addresses are free. They can integrate with your existing DNS, whether that be on Route 53 or whether that be on a third-party provider, right? SSD-based storage with snapshotting to do backups or migration. And then, something not on the slide, but super important, load balancers. So as your workload grows, how can you scale it out horizontally and add some redundancy? And then all of that can be tied back into the larger AWS universe, right? Through something called VPC peering. In some cases, those services are just available to you. So as your site grows, as your needs expand, you have access to everything AWS has to offer. So super easy to get started, super predictable pricing, backed by the power of AWS. That's essentially what Lightsail is. And with that, we're ready for our first demo. So I'm going to go ahead and hand it over to Gabriel, and he's going to take you through an overview of the Lightsail console.
Hi, everyone. So this is the Lightsail console. As you can see, you start in this Instances tab here, and I've got my Sailbot blog here and a new demo instance spun up. And in another demo, I'll actually walk you through what it looks like to create a WordPress instance and log into it. But real quick, this is the Instances tab. Networking is where you can do things like create static IPs, create DNS zones, and load balancers. Under storage, you can actually add new disks for your systems. And then under snapshots is where you can actually take an existing snapshot of your instance and create a new instance from that snapshot. So that's a lot of words. What exactly does that look like? So if I wanted to get started, I can click Create Instance. And already by default, we have Linux and WordPress selected for you. So in theory, all you need to do is just scroll to the bottom of the screen, choose a name, brand new instance, and click Create. And now with one of the other instances that I already have created, I can just show you very quickly. You have access to things like our one-click SSH terminal right here. We'll go through that a little bit more in a future demo, but you can also see things like the current system disk that's attached and attach some new disks, and do things like change some of your firewall settings or create a snapshot of your disk. With that, I will hand it back over to Mike.
Thanks, Gabriel. That was great. So as you can see, there's a lot of power built into that interface. Things that you would normally associate with EC2 instances, like security groups, have been distilled down into that firewall screen where you can open and close ports as needed really easily, snapshotting, adding disks. There's a lot of power there, but also a lot of simplicity and elegance, actually. I'm a huge fan of the UI. All right, so what does it mean to run WordPress on Lightsail? As you saw in the demo, there's a bunch of different blueprints, right? There's different stacks, there's different applications, one of which is WordPress. And you can go through it, and as Gabriel showed you, basically launch that. You could launch it in one click if you want to just leave the name the default and not change anything, of course. But it's really just a few clicks. Literally deploys in about 3 minutes. Super quick to get out there. Once it's up and running, you've got the most up-to-date, secure version available, right? So we work with Bitnami to provide the instances to make sure that they are patched and secured. We then have the firewall and port management that we showed there on the one screen, so you can open and close ports as you need if you need to extend it. We can integrate with SSL, right? We can integrate with the DNS to lock it down that way. And we talked a little bit about the virtual machines. The console is easy to use, and we're going to take a look in the next demo a little bit, or one of the further demos at the integrated SSH terminal. But I want to talk about that a little bit. If you're new to cloud instances or Linux or whatever, and you haven't SSH'd before, so you may see something like an SSH key pair and be like, I don't even know what that is, and that's okay, because we're going to give you a default one, and we're going to give you this one-click access that we just saw. But if you are an experienced user and you want to have your own key pair and you want to use your preferred terminal, whether that's PuTTY in Windows or the iTerm on the Mac or whatever it is, that works too, right? So you can use the integrated terminal, use your terminal, however you want to work with it, right? And then we'll talk at the end a little bit about scalability, but realize that we're going to do a demo on migration. But if your site gets bigger and you need more horsepower, migrate it, fire up a new instance, migrate it back, and you're up and running. That's one way to do it. Add services, separate the database out, right? We'll talk about this all on another slide, but little preview here. So as we mentioned before, we're going to go through in the next demo. Basically, when you create your instance, you need to basically decide where you want to run it. We are globally available. You'll see that in the next demo. Check the WordPress bundle. The plan size dictates what you're going to pay, anywhere from $5 a month on up. Give it an instance name, click create, and then profit, right? And launch the blog, and away it goes. So with that, actually, we're going to take a look at that process now, and Gabriel will take you through that.
So I'm back on the home screen, and I want to show you, again, real quick, when I go to create an instance, I can actually choose a region. So right now, by default, I look at Ohio, but as you can see, we've got availability in the United States, the EU, Asia Pacific, and now Canada. And so we can, stick with Ohio and choose Linux as our platform. Windows is also an option. But we'll stick with that so that we can use the WordPress pre-configured application stack. And then as we go down, we can select something like the $5 bundle. And then here, I will create a new instance. So this is going to be my WordPress demo. Now, I already created one here, and one of the things that Bitnami does with the application is you actually get a generated user password. So right now, if I go to the public IP address for this WordPress instance, you can see it's running and it's got a very default default WordPress instance. So we'll actually need to add some content. We want to log in. How do you go about doing that? Helpfully, there's this manage page right here to say, okay, what you need is your username is going to be user, and then the password is created on first boot. So the way that we get that password is going back to the instance management. You can use this connect using SSH. And by default, we're in the home directory. So if I type ls, you can see the contents. And there's this file here called Bitnami application password. So if we use the command cat and then Bitnami application password, that will just print out that password that was generated custom for this instance. And now if I highlight the password with my mouse here, it will copy it to this cross-instance clipboard, so I can copy it out from here. So I highlighted it, and then that was available in this clipboard tool here, and now I'm copying this again in my local machine. So I've got that password, and what I need to do is go to the management screen. So there's a login link here. It's pretty standard WP login. So our username is user, and our password is that password that I just copied from the instance. Now I can click login. And as you can see, some of the plugins need a few updates, so you can go ahead and update those now. But we want to create a post, and so I'm going to add a new one and say hello Lightsail users, and hey peeps, and I'm going to hit publish, and you can see that we've already published to our instance. So with that, I'm going to hand it back over to Mike.
All right, thanks, Gabriel. So I think, the interesting thing here, the thing I want to reiterate is that you're getting a full-blown WordPress instance here, right? So the database is running on the Lightsail instance, control panel, and between that SSH session and the admin console, you can do whatever you want to do, right? It's up to you at this point to go off and create that site, and there's no restrictions placed by us or anything else, right? It's a full-blown, fully, full instantiation, I guess, of WordPress is the point I was trying to make. So what would those next steps be? Well, one of the things we didn't look at in the demo that's pretty easy to do is to create a static IP address, right? So by default, you're going to get a dynamic IP address, and that is an IP address that could change if that instance needed to be rebooted, right? And that's not optimal for a production website to have your IP address changing all the time. So a static IP address, those IP addresses are free as long as they're attached to your instance. So create a static IP address, takes a couple clicks to do that. And then you would take that IP address, update your DNS records. So if you're on Route 53, or maybe you use some other provider, take that IP address, create a record for your domain for that Lightsail instance, and get that all hooked up. And then if you need to access to be able to load files, for instance, into the instance, you might want to set up something like secure FTP to do that. A couple of different things you might want to do just for additional configuration, in addition to what Gabriel talked about, like updating your plugins, applying a theme, all that other stuff that kind of goes hand in hand with running a WordPress site. So what do you do then as your site grows, right? And so we can kind of think about this in a couple of different ways. If you're comfortable with keeping everything on one system, and so you're not really worried about fault tolerance or redundancy, you can just increase the plan size. So we'll do, the next demo is going to be a migration, right? So you could just basically say, well, we're on the $5 instance, but we need to move up. And those instances are priced based on virtual CPU, RAM, data transfer, and storage, And so if any of those things seem to get pegged, you can use the dashboard in there to view those metrics. Then you would want to go ahead and bump up, and that is it's not an automated process, but it's not too difficult. What if you wanted to maybe provide some scalability? Well, I kind of look at this in a two-part problem, right? The first is you're going to want to separate your web console from your data, right? So separate the presentation from the data, and you do that by migrating your database out. And you can do a couple of different things here, right? So we have a functionality called VPC peering, and what VPC peering does is allows you to marry your Lightsail virtual private cloud against an existing AWS VPC, and then you can take advantage of all those AWS features. So in this case, maybe we want to use RDS, right? And we want to run the database in RDS. Well, we do the VPC peering. It's literally one click in the console. Once the other VP is set up, of course, VPC is set up, and create the instance in RDS, migrate the data, and you're off and running. The other thing you might want to do is maybe you don't want to move to RDS, or you don't want to deal with VPC peering. You can just stand up another RDS instance. You can install MySQL, and then you can, migrate the data over to that instance, and now you've got your database running in one Lightsail instance, and you have the web front end running on another. Now, once you've done that, you can horizontally scale out your front end, right? So if you're getting a lot of traffic and that's really where you're bottlenecking, you can basically, or if you want some fault tolerance in your web front end, you can create a snapshot, create 3 more identical instances, or 4 or 5 or whatever you want to do, and then put them behind a Lightsail load balancer. Lightsail load balancers are super easy to create in the Lightsail console. That's going to give you a little bit of scalability horizontally, and it's going to give you some redundancy as well. The other thing, we didn't highlight it explicitly, but when you create those additional instances, you can put them in different availability zones. That's an option in the Lightsail console, right under where you choose your region. So a couple of things you can do there to grow your WordPress site on Lightsail. Just because it's easy to use doesn't mean it can't handle more demanding workloads, because it certainly can, and we try to make that as easy as possible. So we kind of talked about this already, right? To migrate, you back up your existing WordPress blog, create the new instance in Lightsail, log into it, import the XML file that you got out of your export, modify your DNS records, bring over your data, and all of that. And we're going to actually look at that now in our next demo.
All right, so there are a couple things that Mike outlined that you can do to scale up your instance. So first, the easiest one. Currently, I've got this Sailbot blog, and you can see there's some content here. But as I get more traffic, maybe I need just a bigger instance size. So that's actually really easy to do. I can go to Sailbot blog under snapshots, and you can see I've created a few snapshots here, and I'm going to take the most recent one and create a new instance from snapshot. As Mike mentioned, because this is created in Oregon, I could create this in a different availability zone. So let's choose availability zone C. And then right now it's on a $10 a month instance, but if I want, more RAM and more attached storage space and transfer, I could bump this up to a $20 a month instance, and I could say, larger Sailbot instance. So again, I took the snapshot of the existing Sailbot blog. I chose a different availability zone. I chose a larger instance plan, and I gave it a name. And that's all I have to do to create a new instance that's larger. This instance actually has a different IP address, but you can see here, I've already created a static IP for Sailbot blog. So if I click here, I'm actually going into the management page for the static IP. And so once I'm sure that I've migrated over and everything's up and running on my larger Sailbot blog instance, I can just detach this and then choose Sailbot blog. So I'll go ahead and do that. So I've detached from that first instance, and now I'm going to choose the larger Sailbot instance. So any DNS rules I've set up that are pointing to this static IP address here, 54.215.52, I can click attach, and reload, and the server should be up and running. So kind of hard to show you, but this is actually a new server that is a larger instance size that is running. Okay, so that's option one. Now, let's say you already are hosting WordPress somewhere else and you want to bring it over to Lightsail so that you have access to all the options here. One thing you might want to do is actually use a plugin to migrate all of the content. And there are a couple of different plugins you can use for this, but one that we've had a good amount of success with is the all-in-one WP Migrate. And one of the things that this gives you over and above the existing export that comes with WordPress is it will export all of the content along with the media content along with the text that comes with it. So we can actually use this all-in-one WP Migrate and export to in this case, it's small enough that we can export it to a file, but you see you have a number of options if you have a lot of content that you need to migrate. So you could use an Amazon S3 bucket, send all the content there, and then pull that content from that same S3 bucket. That would just require a few more steps of configuration. So you see it's helpfully showing that I have this 86 meg file that I can download with the content. And so I'll close now that I'm downloading that content. And earlier, I showed you that I was creating that new instance in Ohio here. So I'm going to actually go into this one and go to the plugin section, because here I haven't activated the all-in-one WordPress migration plugin. And let's say you're using another provider and you hadn't already installed, it wasn't already in this list, you can just search for, that's installed plugins, but you can add a new plugin and search for all-in-one migration. And here, if you click activate, you'd have to click install now instead. But yeah, that is the plugin that you'd need for wherever else your WordPress is installed. And now that this is activated, I can go ahead and import from a file and choose from my downloads that WordPress import file. So it'll take a little while to actually upload the content, but I just wanted to go through some of those options for migrating from an existing WordPress instance into Lightsail. All right, with that, I'm going to hand it back over to Mike.
Thanks for the demo. That was great. There's actually another webinar that we had done previously and recorded and made available on demand. It's up on YouTube. If you just look for scaling your production application with Amazon Lightsail, you'll find it. And that's sort of a 300 level discussion on some of those things that we talked about with load balancing and all of those other things. So yeah, we've got a couple minutes left. We've spent a lot of time talking about how easy Lightsail is, and I didn't want to leave you with the impression that you were limited in the way you could use Lightsail. However, as great as the console is, and I love it, there's also a full API and CLI integration with the AWS CLI for Lightsail. So everything you saw us do here, most of that can be done via the command line as well, using those tools. So if you are fully into, sort of infrastructure as a service and infrastructure as code, and you want to automate all of that, we can definitely do that. And there's a bunch of different options around there. Not a discussion for this webinar, but I wanted to make sure that you knew it was available to you, and maybe a blog or something that I'll write in the future to indicate that, and give you some more information on that. With that said, do want to leave you with some resources where you can go in and dive a little bit deeper. The first is just sort of, the first article will just walk you through what you saw here today. So if you grab that article, that'll get you started on Lightsail and WordPress pretty easily. Doing some SSL certificate integration and how that's handled in those instances with Bitnami. How you can implement emails from WordPress and get that process configured up, and then a little bit more on the last topic that we talked about, the WordPress migration. So with that, I think that's what all we have time for today. We do of course have time for questions, so we'll take those now. But on behalf of Gabriel and myself, I want to thank you all for tuning in today. And you know, what I would say is after the webinar, jump up on a Lightsail console. You got that $5 free tier, good for 30 days or 750 hours, whichever comes first. And you can play with Lightsail. You can even throw a WordPress blog up there and kind of get your hands dirty. Again, thank you very much for attending, and see you next time.